Hello there, Black White News, and I wanted to talk about the new asylum reforms. Simplify it for you, just in case you're interested, and I assume you are interested, otherwise, you wouldn't be looking at this video. So let me get on with it. Fast decisions, fragile lives. What the new asylum reform really means. There are moments when the language of politics becomes so polished, so procedural, that it almost floats above real life. Words like reform, efficiency, control, fairness, they sound neat, reassuring even. But down here on factory floors, on bus routes, in hospital waiting rooms, in overcrowded flats and temporary accommodation, policy doesn't arrive as a headline. It arrives as a knock on the door, or a letter you don't fully understand, or a deadline you didn't know you had missed. And that's why we need to slow this story down. Because the Home Secretary's proposed asylum reforms are not abstract. They do not land evenly, and they do not fail on a blank slate. They fall on people who already live with protected characteristics. People whose race, disability, religion, gender, age, sexuality, or trauma history already shapes how the system sees them and how much grace it extends. So let's talk plainly, let's talk human. Under these reforms, we are told the aim is to speed things up, to deter abuse, to restore public confidence. But when speed becomes the priority, the first thing that disappears is context. And when context disappears, the people most affected are the ones whose lives do not fit neatly into boxes. Take race, for example. Many asylum seekers arriving in the UK come from countries shaped by war, colonial extraction, or political instability. Places where British foreign policy once had a hand, even if we don't like to admit it now. These individuals are disproportionately black and brown, and that matters because race already influences credibility. It always has. We see it in the whose stories are believed, in whose fear is recognised as legitimate, in whose documentation is treated with suspicion. Faster processing doesn't correct that bias, it amplifies it. When decisions are rushed, officials rely more heavily on instinct, pattern recognition, and assumptions are rarely neutral. A middle-class British accent buys you time. A foreign one costs you it. Then there's disability, the quiet category, the one that rarely makes it into speeches. Many people seek asylum are not living with disabilities that are visible. PTSD, depression, anxiety, chronic pain, the cognitive effects of torture, trafficking. The reforms place greater emphasis on headlines, compliance, interviews, digital reporting. Miss an appointment, misunderstand a form, struggle to articulate your story in the right way, and the consequences can be severe. But trauma doesn't work to a timetable. Someone who freezes when questioned is not lying, they may be reliving. Someone who contradicts themselves may not be deceptive, they may be disassociating. A system that values speed over sensitivity doesn't just overlook this, it punishes it. And for disabled asylum seekers, punishment often looks like disbelief. Now let's talk about women, particularly women fleeing gender-based violence. The reforms tighten the definition of what counts as a serious claim. They raise thresholds of proof, but many women fleeing forced marriage, domestic violence, sexual assault, or honour-based harm arrive without paperwork, without witnesses, without neat timelines. Abuse often happens in private. Shame silences. Fear erases evidence. When the bar is raised, the unspoken message becomes clear. Prove it, or it didn't happen. And when disbelief meets patriarchal assumptions about how a real victim would behave, speak, cry, women fall through the cracks, not because their fear isn't real, but because the system has no patience for complexity. LGBTQ plus asylum seekers face a similar trap. The reforms emphasise consistency and credibility. But how do you measure credibility when someone has spent their entire life hiding who they are to survive? When your identity was criminalised, when coming out meant death, prison, or family rejection? We've already seen cases where LGBTQ plus people are expected to prove their sexuality in ways that are invasive, humiliating, and culturally ignorant. Faster decisions don't remove that cruelty, they entrench it. There is less time to understand nuance, less space for trust to build, less willingness to listen beyond stereotypes. And then there are children. Children who arrive alone, children who translate from their parents, children who grow up in hotel rooms, moving every week, never knowing which school they'll be in next. The reform promises efficiency, but children don't experience efficiency. They experience instability. A child with a developing brain does not interpret uncertainty the way an adult does. Prolonged insecurity wires anxiety into their nervous system. When age assessments are rushed, when childhood is questioned, when a teenager is told they are really an adult because it's administratively convenient, the damage lasts far longer than the decision letter. And finally, religion. For some, faith is the reason they fled. For others, it's the only thing holding them together. Yet religious persecution is often poorly understood, especially when it doesn't resemble Western narratives. Minority Christian groups, Muslims fleeing sectarian violence, converts, atheists in theocracies. Their stories require cultural literacy. When reforms prioritize when reforms prioritize output over understanding, faith-based claims are flattened, misunderstood, or dismissed as generic. The quiet courage of belief becomes invisible. And here's the part we don't say loudly enough. Protected characteristics don't exist in isolation. A disabled black woman, a gay asylum seeker of faith, a traumatized child with a racialized background. These identities stack, they compound, and every layer adds friction when interacting with the state. What these reforms risk doing is creating a system where the easiest cases succeed and the most complex, the most vulnerable, the most human are quietly filtered out, not because they lied, but because they didn't fit. And for a working class audience listening tonight, this might sound distant. You might be thinking, that's not my world. But here's the uncomfortable truth. Systems that learn to move fast and ignore nuance don't stop at the border. When discretion disappears, it disappears everywhere. We've already seen it in welfare assessments, in automated sanctions, in rigid eligibility rules, in digital systems that can't hear a human voice breaking on the other end of the line. Asylum policy is often the testing ground. If we allow a system to treat the most marginalised as disposable, it teaches itself a lesson that compassion is optional and efficiency is king. And one day, when you need understanding, instead of speed, you may find it's no longer available. So when we talk about asylum reform, let's be honest. This is not just about numbers. It's about what kind of country we are becoming. Whether we still believe that fairness means equity, not sameness. Whether we understand that protected characteristics exist precisely because history has shown us repeatedly who gets crushed first when systems harden. Yeah, I'm Black Bright News. I don't rush past stories like this because behind every reform is a real person holding their breath, holding their life, hoping their life will be judged with care rather than convenience. And once the care is gone, it is very hard to bring it back. So sometimes we do feel as though this has got nothing to do with us. But like I said, it will affect us in the end, and we'll wonder why things have changed so drastically and we didn't realise. It's because we thought it was happening to them and we didn't think it would reach us. So I think I'll end it there. I think I've done enough for the night. You have a wonderful time, and if I don't speak to you until Christmas, have a good one. Take care now. Bye-bye.